Welcome to another episode of Invigorate Your Business with George Stroumboulis. Today, I sit down with Manish Kapoor. He is a global expert in the supply chain and logistics arena. He has worked for companies including Amazon and FedEx, and part of the teams responsible for making same-day delivery a thing. We're going to dissect his new business. We're going to talk about what he's learned over the years from studying at Ivy League schools to running his own operation with over 1,500 employees around the world. Enjoy this episode starting now. My name is George Stroumboulis, and I'm extremely passionate about traveling the world, meeting new people, and learning about new businesses. Join me as I sit down with other entrepreneurs to learn about their journeys. This episode of Invigorate Your Business starts now. So we're going to jump into this. So today I am sitting with Mr. Manish Kapoor. He is the CEO, founder, the brains behind Advatix, right? It's a global logistics supply chain company. I'm very happy to be sitting with you today. We go back probably 7 years.
That's right.
Right? And working with you and just learning what you're doing. And then your background is incredible, just from an education standpoint, intellect, companies you've worked with, and services and products you've brought to market for brands like Amazon, FedEx. Truly impressive, right?
Thank you.
Making the hard decision to say, okay, corporate America, tremendous success. I'm going to start my own thing from scratch, and I'm going to enter this entrepreneurship world, right? And just put everything on the line and build this large international company with thousands of employees across the board. And really taking the legacy from your family back in India, multiple generations of entrepreneurs, and stepping into this world, right? Like it's a cool story. You are a very good person, really smart. So I'm glad that you're sitting here today with me.
It's good to see you. Thanks for having me here, George.
Absolutely appreciate it. Let's start high level. What does your company do?
Yeah, so after 25 plus years in supply chain working for large companies, including Amazon and FedEx and so on, we got on a mission to help young companies scale up and some large companies improve their supply chains as well. At the heart of any company that produces products, whether it's going to retail stores or somebody's home, it's supply chain, moving things. And we felt like there's so much opportunity and waste in the process. And so our mission is to help other companies really improve their supply chain.
Yeah.
And bring all the experience to that. Yeah.
Well, and you say other companies, like you've helped companies that were not household brands at the time, but now have become household brands. What are some of the companies that you've seen from small scale to household names?
Yeah, some of those companies like Rent the Runway, we have Black Tux, GoPuff, which scaled up nicely and actually acquired Bevmo in this area, and Beyond Meat, and so on. And then eventually helped companies like Home Depot and General Motors launch their electric truck division as well.
Yeah, incredible. Go back to education. We're going to talk, before we get into Amazon, FedEx, what you did there. Go back to your education. First of all, how important is it in your family and your culture, where you studied, right? And then how that led into like corporate America, a career here.
I think it's a known fact in Indian families when you're growing up, at least our generation, there were only a few options. Either you become an engineer or a doctor.
Right.
I picked the engineering path and engineering in India, and then kept thinking about higher studies, and that's why I came to the US to go to grad school. I got my master's and eventually an MBA after that. So education has played a big role, and in my case, it came from my inspiration was my dad, because he was in engineering school when he lost his dad, and he had 4 younger siblings to take care of, and he couldn't finish his engineering.
He couldn't finish it.
He's still the smartest person that I know. And so it was his dream for me and my sister to finish his dream.
Wow.
And so both of us, my sister also has 2 masters, that was our inspiration to stay with as far as education is concerned.
So your father lived in India, sent you and your sister here for school?
That's right.
So you studied here. So talk to me about your father. We're talking several generations in the printing business.
That's right.
Back in India.
That's right.
Okay, so what's that like growing up, having a father in that space?
Absolutely. And you mentioned the entrepreneur. Yeah, I became an entrepreneur only 8 years ago. First of all, I admire other entrepreneurs because it's not as easy as it looks. So some mutual admiration for you as well. I've watched you grow as well. I grew up in my dad's print shop, 4 generations of printers in the family, got my engineering in printing, came to the US to do masters in print.
Wow.
And spent first 10 years in the printing industry. And then FedEx acquired Kinko's, which is now called FedEx Office. And I was pulled in to help with that acquisition right after that. That was my first exposure to supply chain.
So you were over here working in print. So you got your master's in printing engineering.
That's right.
Okay. And then you came to the States and worked in that arena.
Right.
And then FedEx pulled you in, which Kinko's became Office.
That's right.
Okay. So what type of printing, like when I hear printing now, I'm like, is it going away? Is it a dying, dinosaur type industry? What was the evolution from what you studied to where we're at today?
Yeah, we've heard for the last 20, 30 years it's going away, but it's still here.
Right.
It is declining, right, with digital media and so on. The printing technology itself has shifted more towards digital. What that means is you're able to do short runs cost effectively. With old technology, you had to run thousands of copies. Now you can do one copy and still be cost effective. So I spent 10 years in the check printing industry, believe it or not, and because checks were declining.
Yep.
And my main focus was helping that industry adopt digital printing technology so you could produce fewer checks. So I got to work with Xerox to create the first digital magnetic toner-based printer with a PostScript front end.
For checks?
For checks.
Oh, wow.
So that's where I started. But then I finished my MBA and FedEx bought Kinko's when I got pulled into that, mostly because of print. I joined FedEx and my boss says, hey, can you handle trucks? Most people I don't know, I actually welcome and invite such challenges and didn't know what I was getting into.
What would handle from what aspect? From the logistics distribution side of it?
Yeah, so we had a US-wide fleet of trucks that we were using for deliveries, and it needed to be improved.
Yep.
So I took it on. I did not have any experience, but that also meant I didn't have any baggage, which means clean slate. I started to question the basics, like why are the trucks parked? They should be moving, right? We're paying leases on this and so on and so forth. That led to creating the first centralized dispatch in the US. So think of that as an air traffic control for trucks.
For trucks. For FedEx specifically.
For FedEx Office, yeah. And so at that time, smartphones were not even out. So we wrote a driver app on a push-to-talk phone and started to hand those to the drivers. A big change management challenge. And so I was watching my drivers on my screen 15 years ago when there was no smartphones, Uber, Lyft was not there.
Jeez.
That technology was built. And we started to manage the entire fleet from Plano, Texas.
Through their phones, you were able to track.
That's right.
Geo-track basically where they're at.
And communicate with them, let them know where the next stop was, what they're supposed to do. It started to digitize the workflow for the drivers.
So did you specifically spearhead that development of that technology? Or was that something you proposed and then FedEx goes and tries to figure it out?
We actually had partner companies that helped build it, but we came up with a business concept. And
with the concept.
rolled it out.
And then basically when that's built and deployed, all the trucks, you see all the inefficiencies.
That's right, yeah.
Wow. Where you think of, okay, now you can buy these, GPS trackers, you put them in, like where we are today, it's offered around the board, but 15, 20 years ago, that was not.
Right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so the impact was so big, there was significantly financial advantage for the business, obviously. And the customers were really happy because now we could tell them the exact ETA when the driver is coming, and businesses needed that we were serving and so on. That led to a new service that we ended up launching called FedEx Same Day City, which was a point-to-point courier service.
Okay.
Across the nation.
For FedEx Office.
Actually, it became a FedEx Express product.
Really?
Operated by FedEx Office.
So basically same day.
Right, same day delivery.
Wow.
We had 2-hour and 4-hour services that we were offering point to point.
Way before Amazon Prime had their same day type service? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's where Amazon came in, and I had no plans to change jobs. FedEx is an awesome company. Really enjoyed my years over there. But then Amazon came knocking, and it was time to start to build last mile delivery for Amazon.
Right.
So I moved to Amazon and helped launch home delivery in US, UK, India, and China for first 4 markets where we started that. That's
incredible. So what year was that when you went over there?
2012, 2013. That's more than 10 years ago now.
We don't realize I was flying back from Toronto Sunday night, and my daughter broke her arm, right? She broke it. She has a cast, and we're taking off from Toronto. It's a 5-hour flight to Los Angeles. And we're sitting there, and I'm trying to buy the new wrap for her. She wanted a pink wrap, so I was going to wrap it in pink for her before school on Monday. We got home Sunday night, and I go on Amazon, and I'm looking, And the option was, I don't know, 4 to 6 p.m. or 5 to 10 p.m. or the next day. And I'm like, oh, I wish there was sooner. And I sat there and I'm sitting there. We take for granted this offering right now that within the same day, within the same half day increments, that if it goes on one day, we don't realize how lucky we are, right? So you were part of the team that helped accelerate that. Right? Like Amazon, which has become globally known, like same day, instantly, within a couple hours.
Right.
Where were they when you joined? Like, what was their service? Like typical courier?
No, I think when I joined, it was mostly UPS handling that volume. And we knew there was an opportunity for us to start building our own fleet and transportation and so on. So the gray vans with the smileys that you see now came out of that. Actually, the very first delivery station for last mile was in Inglewood outside of LAX. That's where it all started.
That was the first one.
That was the first one. And we started to deliver food first, Amazon Fresh, and then eventually added the .com packages to it. And then while the team will roll that out nationwide, I joined the team that launched Sunday delivery as well. Well, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, you didn't get packages on Sundays.
Right.
That was an alliance with USPS that did the final mile from your local post office to your home. But everything else we built at Amazon.
Wow. So just over a decade ago, Sunday delivery wasn't available.
Right.
So you helped build that. Amazon Fresh was the grocery delivery, right? Yeah. So where they are today, how long were you there until?
I was there for a couple of years, getting started, all this started up. And all that while I was thinking about eventually, hey, do I go on my own, right? And this is the American dream you were asking about, because it'd been 25 plus years working for large companies, doing fascinating things, great opportunities. But back in my mind, I kept thinking about the American dream. I know you're an immigrant as well.
Yep.
And, I came on a student visa, you move on to work visa, you get your green card, you're waiting, right? And I got to a point now after Amazon and 2 more jobs after that I started thinking, okay, with all this experience, how can I help other businesses really scale up supply chain wise?
Absolutely.
And that's what we did. We took all that experience and started to help other companies.
So we'll get into Advatix right now, but going into that, so like before you even started this company, you had to present, like, did you ever interact with Bezos while you were over there, or did you?
I was in meetings, but not directly.
But in meetings where they're seeing that, and just you got to see where it was up until now. How was it presenting, coming from Indian culture, right? And then you're studying here. At what point did you really feel like, okay, I understand the American culture. I'm presenting to C-level type people. Like, what are the differences and the nuances in cultures?
Right. That I'd say I had an amazing experience at FedEx presenting directly to our founder and chairman, Fred Smith, because when we were building the same day product, he was personally involved and his team was personally involved in that. So like you said, great opportunities opened up. I got to present to him and to the board when we were ready. That's a fascinating experience and exposure.
Oh my God.
The amount of preparation that is required for that, really, I learned a lot.
Yes.
And that's the rigor now we put in when we present it to our customers and their boards as well. So that experience is extremely valuable.
Absolutely. Any horror stories in presenting? Like when you're there, were you ever not prepared? Were you ever like just in a situation where you're like, man, I need to do better? Like,
yeah, there's always lessons learned where sometimes it doesn't go the way you expected and so on. But I think a really interesting story I'll share is that I was initially having trouble explaining the concept of centralizing functions and so on and so forth. And a few of us were scratching heads like, how do we present the idea? Because commonly you do PowerPoint presentations, and so on. We came up with this unique idea. We actually brought folks from the field, from the stores, and we planned a play. Mm-hmm. And we brought some executives into a room, and we posed as customers walking in and showed them the current state on how it's done today. And the same actors actually showed how it can be done in future. So instead of a presentation, we actually did a role play.
Yeah, innovative, overall.
Yeah. And that helped a lot. We could see the light bulbs went off. And there was a turning point for us to convince the company that this is a different way of managing the supply chain overall.
That's really smart. I recently, probably a year ago, presented to a CEO of a larger American co-working type company. I'm familiar with them, but during the presentation, he had stopped and said, this level of information that you're providing is not for a CEO of a company. And I thought we were so prepared going into this, and he wasn't disrespectful in a way, but he stopped us and said, this is just too much what you're doing here. There needs to be a filtered level. And it just deflated me on the spot.
Right.
I'm like, totally understood if I can. And he's like, this is just too much. Let's talk about this. So even after all these years in presenting, and not to C-levels, a lot of the time it's like VPs, directors, I left there and I'm like, look, sometimes you get too comfortable in what you're pitching and what you're doing,
right,
where you got to recalibrate and just put yourself in their shoes on how much time is limited for them. And right, the 15 minutes you're getting, like, just make every second count.
Absolutely.
So we recalibrated. Felt like shit during the process, but
right,
you just got to recalibrate.
I have lots of lessons like that. So I think, to your point, the level of detail has to be right. And
yep,
sometimes we tend to write white papers on a slide, too much text.
Yes.
It's hard to convey the story. And I think missing who's the audience and messaging according to who you're presenting to. My favorite one is, there are two actually. When you're presenting and you get a question from a CEO or a customer, we often say, yeah, we'll get to it in a minute. That's usually not the right approach. When there's a question, you jump to that slide and come back. Is one trick and tip.
In real time.
Real time, right? You see, you don't make the audience wait.
Yes.
So they say, oh, this is great, but what about that? You say, okay, let me answer that question and then go back.
And then
versus saying, once you wait for a few minutes, we'll get there. You lose them. Another big one is when you get a question when you're presenting, do you walk through the logic and then give the conclusion, or do you give the conclusion first and then give the logic? So over the years, what I've learned is, if somebody is saying, hey, looks like your operations is not going well, what's going on? If you start the answer by saying, let me explain, our truck broke down, and you lose them.
You lose them.
If the same question is, hey, your operations is not going well, what's going on? And you say, that's not true. Let me explain what the facts are. The first bite, having them at hello, makes a big difference as well. So those are some of the tips and tricks that we share with each other as we prepare our presentations as well.
That's great feedback. Do you find when you're presenting, do you mostly present you as yourself? We're talking a large company right now, and what you do in multiple countries. Are you presenting mostly to C-suite and board directors, you personally, right? Like, that's who you're presenting to?
For the most part, but at the end, depending on, not always, right? It's mid-level management as well.
Right.
Again, that goes back to knowing your audience at what level of detail that you have
Absolutely.
to be at.
So I guess, is it more financially driven in that this is what you could save, or is it the solution? Like, how do you anchor it mostly?
Right. So I think the right word for that is value at the end, and value in different situations can be different. So for example, if there's a company that is looking to improve their bottom line, yes, the focus will be, hey, how can we improve utilization of the building or reduce transportation cost and so on. But then if you're dealing with a company that wants to grow rapidly, the focus is on growth. The value is different in that case.
Right.
Because they're looking for scalability. At the end, financials is what counts. That's a lesson we've learned, is that regardless of what the customer might say, we have to bring financial value to them. And that financial value can be more revenue, but it typically ends up being the bottom line.
Excuse me. Sorry, got emotional with that. Okay, so you go from FedEx, and at this point you're sitting there and you say, look, I can work for any Fortune 100, 500 companies in the US and bring tremendous value and make a great living and good salary and bonuses and all this stuff. Or I could sit there, and my kids now are barely double digits in ages, right? And I could put it all out there and start my own thing. What motivated you to even start your own thing? And what was that like? I know we've known each other, and sitting down at the table and going through it with your wife and making it interactive.
Right.
But like, what was that process?
Yeah, I can't forget that day, because it's a pivot, a massive pivot. 25 plus years working for others, and to be able to switch that and be okay with not having a paycheck the next week. It wasn't an easy decision, but I would say it was a family decision. And so we sat at a dining table, kids and wife, and we looked at pros and cons and made that decision. And I say it's a family decision because if I went and took up another job, I would have had to move again. And I'd moved the family. We lived in 6 states by then.
6 states. And your
East
kids
Coast,
were
West
barely
Coast,
10, 12 at the time. When you around there.
Yeah. Kids were in middle school, right, and a younger one in elementary school. We listened to them and they said, we don't want to move anymore, right? We've got friends and we're okay if you have to travel. I caught on that, right? That was okay. So the agreement was, hey, Dad's going to travel a lot, but we all get to stay where we love to live right now. And they knew that this was something new that I was going to try out. It may work out, it may not work out. In that level of support and flexibility. So I owe it to my wife. She's a trooper, right? That's so important. And kids, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a family affair when you get into entrepreneurship. It does take a toll on the personal life.
And the right spouse, can make or break that, right?
Absolutely.
It's either
Absolutely.
I support you, I got this on the home front, or why are you gone? What's going on? And it's just another level of support that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in my case, it was no questions asked, right? And for the first 6 months, I was flying to New York every week.
Every week. It's intense.
Right.
And you're missing out on the moments and you're missing out on a lot of stuff, but you're getting this up and running.
Right.
So when you decided to start it, was it just Manish with a vision, or did you say, hey, I have a couple key players, we're going to start doing this together, and this is our vision? Like, what did you think you were going to change by starting your own company?
Yeah, good question. Normal path is, which I didn't take, the normal path is you have an idea, you raise funding, you build something, then you go to market. I went the other way around. Because right from day one, I'm thinking, okay, if I raise now, I'm losing control from day one.
Yes.
Might as well just stay in a job then if that's the case, right? So we took a different approach. We actually found really good customers and we listened to what kind of problems they were running into. And we started to solve those problems. So it did a few things. One, we were able to generate revenue immediately by solving real problems that they were having. And we didn't assume what those problems were. And so when we started eventually to build our technology platform, it was all really grounded in real issues and problems that were impacting our customers.
Okay.
So we were relevant from day one that way. And then we had to run a really tight ship because we bootstrapped to 500 people globally, just based on that, watching every dollar that's coming in, making sure that we value that. To this day, we are pretty mindful of that. I still fly coach, doesn't matter how big we are and so on and so forth. Because those basics have to stay if you have to be successful.
100%. 500 people. How many employees today do you have?
We're close to 1,500.
1,500 over less than a decade. Scaling up to
8 years, yeah.
In 8 years.
Right.
Like that's insanely fast.
We're fortunate that we actually started Advatix, then started a 3PL company called Expedal.
Yeah.
And then eventually, recently acquired a company called Archway. That's where the bulk of the workforce came in.
Yes.
They're part of the family now. We created a holding company called GCG, which actually stands for our mission, which is Growth Catalyst Group of Companies.
Okay.
Because our mission is to be the catalyst for growth for our customers.
Yes.
So all three companies have the same mission, working together.
And Expedal is, can you spell that just so we're...
XPDEL for expedited delivery.
Expedited delivery. So the three pillars that you have right now, Advatix, right? That's the logistics supply chain arm, consulting, right?
Right. Advatix is consulting, technology, and we have a control tower out of India. Believe it or not, we're managing thousands of trucks in Canada and US from India.
From India.
Live tracking and all that. So that's Advatix. We say that's the brain, and Expedal and Archway are the muscle. Because there's physical warehousing involved in the other two. Expedal is 3PL to do same-day delivery, next-day delivery, B2B, direct-to-consumer, pick, pack, ship. Archway is the most interesting. That's why we got into it, which...
Strategic acquisition?
Absolutely.
Was that,
Absolutely. Archway is a 65-year-old company acquired by a 6.5-year-old company.
65-year-old Archway,
right,
based here in the States, acquired by a company barely 6-7 years old.
That's right.
How does that happen?
Well, we were consultants into Archway, and I joke about it, we were dating, fell in love, and decided to get married. We went in, we were able to make a pretty significant impact in a short period of time. And the owners at that time and we got together, and it made sense to put these companies together. And what Archway does is, if you walk into large retailers, the signage that you see inside those stores comes from Archway. And majority of the gift cards that you see in the US and your grocery stores and so on, the supply chain of that is also supported by Archway.
Yeah. For listeners outside of the country, the gift card game here in the US is on another level.
That's right.
Convenience stores, supermarkets, CVS type, pharmacies. There's just, gift cards everywhere. Like that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So talk about full circle, right? You end up buying a 65-year-old company that's big in printing. Your family lineage back home is printing, right? Like that was not by planning.
No, it's just stars aligning. It's mind-boggling. My dad's really happy that I'm back in print, but it's fascinating how without my choice, I went away from printing and I didn't choose to come back. It just happened overall. I think the biggest learning that I've had in this journey is to be open to opportunities, because quite often we have our mindset on something.
Yes.
And we may miss out on other opportunities around that. And it's just not me. Fortunately, I have a really strong team that came together 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we've stuck together through this and just keeping an eye on and lots of ups and lots of downs, right, as an entrepreneur. But sticking together through those thick and thin times, but also being open to these opportunities when they pop up. Right. Identify those and get in.
I'm so curious I've always said this about myself. I'm a killer. I'm hungry. I'm great in the startup mode. Like no one's going to outwork me. I'm not saying I'm the smartest. No one's going to outwork me. I love the creative aspect, building it up. I wouldn't be a good employee in a Fortune 1000 company. Like it's just my DNA, right? I say that about myself. You work for massive organizations, have brought together like crazy programs to these companies, right? That now is the norm today, sitting here in 2024. But when you started as a CEO back in the day, starting your company 8 years ago, what type of leader were you then versus today? Like what would your C-suite say about you as a leader? Because that's a lot of employees, over 1,000 employees in such a short period of time.
Right.
How have you evolved?
Great question, George. So because I think the 25 years working for large companies, I learned a ton, right? And I learned a ton on what we should do, but also what we should not do as a business. And so when you look at a culture of one business that I worked for that was really focused on people, then you look at the speed of the other business, quite often it's at odds.
Yeah.
So when we started, we took it as a challenge to say, okay, can we get the speed and the care for people at the same time? How do you manage that balance?
Right.
And so that's how we came up with our guiding principles, which we have evolved. After the acquisition of Archway, we went back and looked at the guiding principles that Archway had and that Advatix had. And we didn't say, ours versus theirs. We just say, okay, let's build a new set of guiding principles that we have. The number one guiding principles that we have is servant leadership.
Okay.
Which honestly I learned at FedEx as well. FedEx has what called PSP, which is people, service, profit.
PSP.
If you take care of your people, they'll provide good service that leads to profit. Not exactly that, but on similar lines, if one of our employees, for whatever reason, is not performing, we talk to the manager first and say, what have you done to help and support them? And we actually live by it that I work for my team, not the other way around.
Right.
So that's been, as an example, a big piece of culture is equally important. And you're an entrepreneur, you know that as well. You define the culture.
You define it.
As a leader.
Absolutely. And you got to show the culture and live it. Like people will, my biggest pet peeve is like, we're a fun culture and we're this and that. Just because you say it, that doesn't mean.
Right.
You go ask your employees to really get a true vision of what type of leader manager was your father? Like, did you ever work in the family business and see?
I watched him work, extremely caring, right? And he had employees, he ran the business for 50 years and employees that stayed for decades with him.
Wow.
It was run like a family.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge way we do business as well. It feels more like a family, even though we're larger in size now.
Yeah.
Globally in 4 continents, but we still run it like a family.
I remember first meeting you probably a year into you launching your company, right? And it was like, hey, where could we collaborate? Where people I may know, vice versa. And just seeing from that year one to where you are today, I don't know if you could share volume of how big your company is. I know you're privately held, so if we don't need to share that, but working with private equity and raising a lot of money to buy big companies like that. Did you always have like a strong financial background? Like you studied engineering, but that's a whole other animal,
Right.
dealing with private equity and everything.
Yeah, after my master's, I did get my MBA as well from Babson, and Babson is known for entrepreneurship.
Right.
That's why I went there. So that also helped a lot financially. We were fortunate that we found a really good financial partner. It was a company that actually owned Archway that also helped us shift the ownership to us, and they're still a strong partner with us. So that was a huge help.
Right.
That way, we haven't done a formal raise still.
That's
It
incredible.
still feels like bootstrapping so far. But I think the financial piece, one of the biggest lessons, I'm sure you'll relate to that, is cash flow.
Yes.
And regardless of which business school you go to, you don't learn cash flow unless you take a hit
Yes.
after that. Of course, we learn about reading financial statements and so on. Cash flow is a different ballgame completely. I'd say that's the biggest learning that I've learned after getting burnt. And there's no shortcuts to it. You have to fail to learn and then
Absolutely.
get stronger at it.
Absolutely. Logistics wise, and I know we have a few minutes left. You got to get back to LA. So I'm aware of your time and I appreciate your time. When it comes to global logistics, right, you guys offer, and I live this every day, we ship to over 30 countries around the world, and dealing with the tariffs and the rate spikes and strikes going on at the ports, it's just a lot. How do you shield your clients through that? You know, like there's so many fluctuations in the market.
Right.
Like during COVID, a 40-foot container from Asia to LA, pre-COVID, $2,500, $3,000. During COVID, got up to almost $30,000.
Right.
Is that just pushed along to your clients? Like how do you handle that?
Yeah. So I think that's where we stand out in terms of the speed of innovation that we bring to solving such problems. One example is we had a customer that was completely a B2B food delivery company. Obviously took a hit during COVID, and we were able to, in a matter of 2 weeks, able to help them pivot to a direct-to-consumer new service that we launched in that case. But then the problems that you're describing, where it was a massive swing in supply chain, especially goods coming from China.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. The cost for bringing a container here went up 10x.
Yeah.
And then dropped back down again. How do you handle those swings? And I think that's where we help companies apply analytics to figure out what's the best answer? How do you deal with it?
Yeah.
And since then, we've been helping a number of companies say, okay, this can happen again? What are the contingencies? How do you create a resilient supply chain and not run into it? And that's leading to some cases where instead of China, there's a lot of nearshoring going on, or bringing manufacturing back as well to the US. We're helping those companies think through that. How do you tackle that?
Oh, yeah.
There's not a whole lot you could have done during the ocean, or especially the ocean freight complexities that you had.
And our biggest challenge, Manish, was you could argue, well, they're charging us this, just pass it on to the customer. It's a global.
Can't do that.
But the problem is, the minute you do that, then they question, well, why are you manufacturing overseas?
Right.
We need to find partners locally because this is going to happen again. So a lot of the times we would absorb those costs, knowing depending on what it was. And if ours went up 10x, maybe we would show the client 5x.
Right.
We were doing the opposite and just explain it that way. So we were in a tough situation. It wasn't just a pass it on and let it go, because we are exposed. We do manufacture internationally.
So I think one of the big area is most companies still don't have good, what's called the S&OP, which is sales and operating planning process. What that is if your demand forecast is off, you may end up buying too much inventory, or you may not buy enough.
Mm-hmm.
You can go wrong in either way, because if you have too much, you lost cash flow there.
Yep.
If you don't have enough, you might lose revenue if you're not able to fulfill the orders. And so that's a big area for us to help companies apply analytics to say, okay, how good is your demand forecast, and are you measuring the accuracy of that month over month? How do you improve that?
Right.
But that's only half of the equation. The other side is capacity planning, and how many buildings do you have? Where do you have those buildings? Are you delivering 2 days? Are you delivering 5 days? That changes the design of your supply chain completely.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So aligning the demand with your capacity and your supply side of the equation is critical. That's a big area that we've helped many companies get better at during COVID and post-COVID, so that they're better prepared if anything like that ever were to happen again.
And we're smaller scale, but I was explaining to you, we have a great contract with the US company where they're expanding across Europe. We're warehousing out of Southeast Europe there with the 3PL and just managing inventory. And we have from I don't know, over a dozen different suppliers, vendors bringing in product there, managing the inventory. Now we're doing some similar model in Australia to service New Zealand, Australia. And like separate of this, we're going to have a conversation on with your services and the software and what you've developed, just being able to do that, because everyone will say, oh yeah, we can help you. We could do this. And it's just having that fully integrated 3PL, the software, the consulting aspect. It's a big deal. Right. And you're doing this for large corporations right now, right? We're not talking a Mickey Mouse operation. Like this is a big deal.
And some smaller companies also, yeah. And I think you're familiar with BevMo here. There's a similar chain on the East Coast, a liquor store chain that during COVID started to get e-commerce orders because people are not walking into stores.
Right.
And then it was great because there's business, but then it was quite a manual process.
Yes.
They were printing out the orders and somebody was going to the store looking for bottles and so on. We went in and completely automated the whole process with the tech solution, where now it's an app. It's a guided pick, believe it or not, in the liquor store. The app tells them where that bottle is. And first of all, it doesn't let you take the order if you're out of inventory.
Okay, good.
It's all connected. And we had to integrate with some really old systems to enable that. So now they're expanding. The business is growing. That's what really gets us excited, where we're able to enable a business to go from a small size to a large size.
To a large. That example, how is it scanning? Like, how are you detecting where the bottles are in a store? Is it a geolocation, or how do you do that specifically?
Yeah, I think geocoding, geolocation, timestamps, that's now it's becoming common.
Sure.
You use Uber, where the drivers are and so on. But what we did was we mandated that we know where the inventory is at all times.
Right.
Not just how much we have, but also know the physical location of that inside four walls, because it directly impacts labor costs if you're searching for things. So the whole idea is to take waste out. Yep. In this case, it's searching for things, right? And then take an order for something you don't have, right? It's common sense.
Absolutely.
Let's not do that. So I think the whole app, the technology that we built is geared towards reducing the manual waste in the process and really streamlining. So yes, everything has to be scanned. Whether you're moving one thing from one location to the other, you scan it so you know where that is.
It's registered, yep.
And then when you're picking and packing, scanning is as big as there as well. I say scanning, that's where we are today. We expect in the future to get even better with AI.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask you. How is that impacting your business? Like, where is it going to go? Like, right. Pie in the sky, where is it going with AI in this space?
We're investing heavily in training our teams and investing in building AI solutions as well. There's a lot of confusion about what AI is, right? And it's a buzzword, partly, until you start to get in and say, okay, gosh, there's a real world application here, and we can start to save labor cost and so on. So we're doing a number of things. There are similar solutions out there, but we're building. For example, a pallet comes into your warehouse. Can my cameras pick up all the boxes on that pallet? So you don't have to even scan things overall. The other one is, can we use vision technology for picking versus having to scan as well?
So explain that. Like, how would that work?
So if you're wearing vision technology, that not only you're seeing the item, but the camera is seeing the item as well, and it detects what that is, you can automate the pick pack. I don't want to give out too many secrets here. But
sure.
Those are some of the really cool things that our teams are working on, both in India and Chile. Those are our engineering teams that are
in Chile as well. India and Chile.
We have an engineering team in San Diego, Chile, but majority of the software team is in India. They team up together to solve these problems.
So when would some of these AI tools be rolled out in general? Like, we're seeing a lot of stuff happening already. Is this over the next 1 year or a few years?
No, actually, we have a few things rolling out now,
Okay.
Which our customers already know, and they're seeing it as well, including some solutions for the Archway services that we provide through Archway. Another example is compliance in retail stores is a big problem for CMOs.
So like what, for example?
So let's say if I'm a CMO and I launch a marketing campaign, right, and I send signs and things to the stores, how do you make sure it was put up on the right date, right? Because if you miss it by a week, it's impacting your revenue. You don't even know what happened.
Yes.
Right. So we built technology where we can do the geocode timestamp. Not only that, we can actually make sure that the right signage was put on the right wall using vision technology as well at the right time.
So existing cameras tapped into a software type thing?
That or an app that, depending on what that particular retailer wants to do.
Jeez.
And how you want to...
like true insight into every location, managed from corporate.
Right. Absolutely.
Wow. That's, it's moving there. It's kind of scary how fast it's happening across all platforms, all industries. Last segment, I know you have a few minutes. Advice. Let's talk about advice in general. You know, from starting your business, advice for people out there that want to take that step. Not everyone has a Ivy League school pedigree, right? But someone who wants to start their own business, what are some key fundamentals that they should consider,
right,
regardless of educational background, right.
Before I started, I used to admire and watch other entrepreneurs go big. And I think this is the notions thinking that anybody who tries goes big, which is a complete myth. Having gone through this, I'd say it's not for everyone, but if you're meant for it, it's great.
Right.
So I think the perseverance, the grit that is required, there's no comparison when you're doing working for a large organization versus when you go on your own. I found new strength, new muscles that I didn't realize I had before to weather the storms. So when things are going great, it's awesome. It's when you start to take some hits and things are not going your way, do you have the right team around you to fight that? And then are you calling the right shots? And not all your decisions are going to be right. Right? And so being okay with the decisions that you're making, and you have to live with those. Ultimately, the buck stops with you. The decisions you are making, I think what the big responsibility that I feel is we've got a large team and they have families, right? And the decisions that I'm making and our leadership team is making is impacting all those lives, right? And so we take that very seriously and try and do our best in terms of making the right decisions, knowing that at times we may miss something. And,
of course. And
so just watching that closely. So I think perseverance, sticking with it, especially when it gets tough, don't give up too soon. And just assume, now I get up in the morning and I expect that some challenge will come up. Mm-hmm. And shifting our mindset from, earlier on I used to get bogged down or worried about, gosh, why did that happen? Now I'm thinking, okay, what's the next challenge, right? Because every challenge leads to something better.
Yes.
And you start to switch your mindset to saying, okay, there's a problem, but how do I turn this into an opportunity in every case that happens? At least you give it your best shot.
Absolutely.
So that'd be the biggest learning, I'd say, for anybody who's trying to.
Yeah, and that's just great advice. Last question. In general, how do you handle when a challenge comes up, decision making? Do you sit there? Do you consult with people, or in real time, hey, 7 out of 10 decisions I make in real time turn out positive and you just keep going? Because it's a lot, right, leading that many people, big company, large numbers.
Right.
How do you manage those?
Yeah, I think being an entrepreneur has changed me as a person mostly in a good way, right? The ability to handle stress, it builds up.
Yes.
And I think that decision making, you have to move quickly. And I've learned lessons after some failures that if you don't, it can impact you as well. Having good advisors around you, having a good team. So in our case, we actually lean on the team quite a bit, making sure that we're thinking through. We're also moving quickly at the same time. And I remember when I started, simple things would bog me down quite a bit. Lose sleep at night.
Of course.
That's life of an entrepreneur. But over the years, you find ways to solve. As long as you keep at it and stick with it, you find better ways to handle the situations. All the way to when it gets really stressful. Usually I'm a long-term person. I'm thinking about 3 years, 5 years. I go down to like an hour. Because if something is not going your way, you can stress yourself so much that you stop thinking. That's when we say, okay, let's go 1 hour at a time and make sure that we're actually moving towards solving a problem together. Yeah. So there's some learnings that I've learned. Just there's no shortcuts to it. You
focus. Yeah. That's incredible. Right. What you've been able to do to scale up so quickly and to the level that you've done is like truly impressive. Like if that was in the last 8 years, like what's the next 8 years going to hold? Like just very impressive. Is there anything else for the listeners on how to get in contact? I know for you, your services speak for itself for those people that need supply chain and everything. Is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially businesses that have products that are moving things supply chain wise. We've got teams with lots of experience and frameworks that we apply to solve in supply chain problems and so on. And I'll share one of those frameworks that we call L Cube I. L Cube is anybody who has warehousing, including your business. You're spending money on labor, logistics, locations, and inventory. That's where most of your dollars are going.
Yep.
And then you add technology T to it. Make sure you have the right technology to help you be as efficient as possible on those dimensions. And it's not one or the other. You have to get better on all of those. So those are the kinds of frameworks that we apply in helping companies. So anybody's who thinks that there is opportunity to improve flow of the building, know where the building should be, transportation, technology help required for this. That's what we do, and be happy to help those businesses with that.
And we're going to put the links up so people, especially in this audience, everybody's selling something, moving something. It's an entrepreneurship type platform. So I appreciate you sitting down with me. This was awesome.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you, Manish. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Invigorate Your Business with George Stroumboulis. Please hit the subscribe and like buttons and follow me on all the main podcast streaming channels. Also, please share your comments when you can. I appreciate your help in expanding this network to a worldwide audience. Until next time, stay invigorated.